Thank you for joining me today. So basically, this concern with the moral agency of artificial intelligence comes from a conflict that we are seeing. Well, actually, I was kind of doing this research before all the ChatGPT boom, but I think we can still see a pattern of conflict between two different beliefs. One that's a promise of what we can call AI ground truth. So the idea that AI can be a better source of information than experts in general, and there are some studies which try to compare the performance of human experts with AI. And the other one, what we can call a general concern of AI as a dangerous knowledge. So we've seen a lot of public figures talking about perhaps slowing down the development of AI or presenting some concerns about it. And I think it's arguable that we are still living in an AI winter, which is a term coined by Professor Floridi. And one of these concerns is whether we can think of AI as able to make moral decisions and therefore to possess moral agency. And why this concern with moral agency? AI has been doing what we can call like the jurisdiction of AI has been growing by each day. And perhaps if we want to be concerned about whether AI can make ethical decisions, the first step is to think about whether it is able to make moral decisions. So basically, the first part is a very short overview of kinds of AI and what we can see as a decision-making mechanism in AI. The second one is try to see a deliberation framework in bioethics as a way to translate bioethical decision-making to AI. The third one is about which limitations we can see in AI-driven bioethical decision-making. The final thoughts are mostly concerned about what's the role that can be played by AI in bioethics. So what we can see today is that what actually was born as a form of, as a concept, as an attempt to translate human intelligence to machines and make these machines able to have some form of intelligence, actually has evolved into a very broad spectrum of different types of AI. So I'm not sure if you can read it, but we often hear a lot of concepts such as machine learning or neural networks, and these are all kinds of AI. These are all kinds of artificial intelligence. And while we are used to hear about them separately, they're never actually used separately. They're used in combination with other forms of AI. So if you're talking, for instance, about navigation by GPS, we are not looking just at deep learning, for instance, but we are also looking at forms of search engine, which are basically looking for the location of a specific establishment. We are using symbolic AI, which is its capability to analyze logic patterns and solve logic problems. We're also looking to deep learning and generative adversarial networks. So a GPS device is actually simulating various solutions at the same time and is trying to make a competition between these different solutions. So it's never used alone. And there are many different ways in which AI can reach a decision. It can be comparing information, making connections between informations. But what kind of AI we are going to talk here? We're going to talk about what isn't actually a AI we can experience right now, which is the artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And AGI refers to some kind of ultimate form of AI, which is possible of emulating any kind of human intelligence. So perhaps we can think of these multiple forms of AI interacting with each other in a most perfect manner. And we don't know exactly whether it is a form that can be achieved, because there are some both practical and conceptual concerns, such as being able to define intelligence, human intelligence, and trying to measure intelligence so we can measure this progress towards AGI. But we're going to consider AGI as a hypothesis for this presentation. And the first step in trying to translate bioethical decision-making to AI, so AI must be coming from somewhere, must be coming from some kind of information. That's why we see this purple thing with a light bulb is called knowledge engineering. So AI must have some kind of expertise as a starting point. And what we can think of a starting point is a deliberative framework, which is basically an attempt to codify decision-making. So this is a framework originally proposed by Johnson, Ziegler, and Winslade, which tries to translate bioethical principles to what we can call bedside decision-making, clinical ethics decision-making. But there are other more specialized frameworks, because as we can see, bioethics can be very complex. You can have all kinds of different solutions, and the solutions are often very context dependent. And we can even conceive irrational factors as part of this decision-making, such as empathy, fear, and also yuck, the called yuck factor. But so let's try to understand moral agency as a first step to evaluate this bioethical decision-making capabilities, even though we can have lots of different thinking models working together in bioethical decision-making. So I'm opting here to choose narrative, Paul Ricoeur's perspective on narrative identity and its relationship to moral agency as a form to try to understand how moral agency works and how it develops. So for Ricoeur, identity is the result of ascribing certain characteristics to someone, because these are both what allow someone to identify him, she, or themselves, and at the same time is what makes this person identifiable. And this moral agency is closely related to narrative identity, because basically the moral agency is part of this process that is constantly ascribing characteristics to both oneself and to others. So we can see, for instance, our character, which is basically the sum of actions, which are in turn the sum of our reiterated actions, but also a device in which we're always trying to keep true to our own values. And of course, there's a temporal gap between these two, because one is continuous and the other one presents some kind of resistance to time. And this gap is solved in Ricoeur's point of view by the narrative identity, because narrative time is not chronological, is not chirological, is subjective and arbitrary. We are building our narrative identity, and for Ricoeur, this is what allows and this is what gives meaning to moral agency, because to be a moral agent is basically to, just a moment, I have to turn off my, because this is what the reason for us to have moral agency is basically this process of building ourselves. And the question is AI capable of narrative identity? So the thing is that this process of selfhood requires some sort of self-reflection, some kind of sentience that allows us to constantly rethink our own values. And it also requires reflection from others. It also requires this act of being recognized by others. So perhaps we can see some kind of handicap in authority, because this AI made decisions, they always facing some form of uncanny valley. They're always facing perhaps these weird gaps that comes from the emulation of human habits and human decision making. But what if we can have some kind of narrative identity. So there is a bioethical current which has been developed in Brazil, which we can call bioethics of autonomous decisions, and this current says that our bioethical reflection is not the result only of our rational elements, such as our reasoning capabilities, but they are also biologically conditioned. So things such as our genetics, our perception of pain, our social values are all playing parts in this bioethical decision making, and they are also part of our own sense of moral responsibility. So
you have 5 more minutes.
Okay, thank you. So what if it were to simulate, thank you. Sorry, what if it were to simulate autonomous reflection? So I can think of 3 major obstacles when you think about this bioethics of autonomous reflection. The first one would be corporeality, such as how some forms of suffering, they need to be understood through some kind of experience, such as the loss of a limb or some form of disfiguration of aesthetic damage. They can only be understood either for its own experience, which makes a way more raw form of understanding the suffering, or partially when we anticipate the suffering and we understand what this means to us. The second one would be the perception of pain, because pain is at the same time universal, so everyone has experience of pain, but at the same time untranslatable. So we have this empathical dynamic which allows us to perhaps feel pain for others' pain, but it is the same conflict that puts pain in the core of bioethics. And third, we can see some kind of human prejudice in our bioethical decision making. So there's always this sense of identification and group self-preservation that is guiding our decisions, and we can question whether machines would share this human prejudice, or they probably lean to some kind of machine prejudice. So perhaps putting machines intuitively in the first place, which has been argued a lot and being point of lots of contention. So what may be the role of AI in bioethical decision making? So perhaps you can think of AI as something that is incapable of fully autonomous decision-making bioethics, but it can be also really useful because it can reflect some of our established methods, especially when we talk about organizational ethics. And this can help us in achieve some form of ethical consistency. It can assist in bioethical deliberations inside an organization. And we can think of it also helping us in assessing the knowledge of human specialists in perhaps a more foolproof manner. So there were some developments of considering AI as partially capable, both ethically and legally. There's this concept of Teilfähigkeit in German, which means, which tries to equate AI perhaps to the way the German law sees animals. So it's not things, but also not people. But most importantly, we shouldn't conceive AI as something separate for human intelligence, but as a tool to expanding it and assisting it. So perhaps this might be the best way of incorporating AI in our bioethical decision making.
2 more minutes. Oh, excellent.
And thank you all for joining me today.
Thank you.